All right. So it's 18:03. We're having lots more people joining us now. Welcome to Loveline, Rosemary, Theodore, and Adeline, Masambula, Chifuase, Bego, Agnes. Thank you for being here. We aim to start about 6:05, so in about 1 minute. We're also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube.
Wow.
So for all of our attendees that are here already, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button and we will try to answer all of them during the session. So far, it looks like we've got people from Cameroon. The UK seems to be leading the charge there. We've got, obviously, someone from Qatar. But yeah, so promises to be a very eclectic audience. So it's 18:05. I think we probably have enough attendees to make a start. Good evening. My name is Dr. Linda Bello. I'm the chairperson of CamDocUK. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our 5th webinar of the series CamDocUK Talking with the Community. Our webinar is going to focus today on nutrition and health. And we chose this topic because, you know, nutrition is really an important topic. We know that it can help to reduce the risk of some diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, stroke, some cancers, and help with osteoporosis, so where you have weak and thin bones. We also know that it can reduce high blood pressure, lower cholesterol, improve your well-being, improve your ability to fight off illness, improve your ability to recover from illness or injury, and increase your energy level. So we thought that this is an appropriate time to have this very important discussion, considering that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we've seen rises in chronic diseases and obesity. We have 3 amazing panelists today who are all experts in their field. We've got Dr. Leke Asong, who is a CamDoc member, who will be talking to us about common conditions that can be resolved by diet. We've got Dr. Lorraine Niba, who will be talking about the foods industry's effort at instituting a healthy nutrition, and Mrs. Lydia Nsutebu, who will be talking about how to make African cuisine more healthy. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the first speaker. As I said to you, his name is Dr. Leke Asong, one of our CamDoc members. He is a portfolio GP, a wellness consultant, author, and inventor. He has worked in over 50 practices, including walk-in centers, urgent care centers, prisons, and the out-of-hours service. He has then undergone further training in functional/lifestyle medicine and is the owner and director of Gut Health Medic, which is a wellness company that specializes in digestive health. Dr. Asong is also the author of the best-selling book, How to Stay Ahead of Your Doctor and Influence Your Health. I'm proud to say I've got a copy of that. I just need it autographed. As an inventor, he has a portfolio of products from multiple categories available for licensing. So without further ado, Dr. Leke Asong.
Okay, so thank you very much for that introduction, Linda. Welcome everyone to the webinar. My name is Leke Asong. I'm a GP, and I'd be talking about food as medicine today. So this is an interesting topic which I really hold dear to my heart. I see patients every day, and there are conditions which can be made better by simply having the right food. It was Hippocrates who said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." He was the father of modern medicine. And of course, this is true. And the reality is, even as far as the ancient Egyptians, they recognized food as therapy. So just go back to that. So the best definition of food I've found is any substance consumed for nutritional support. Now, when I read that, I thought about one thing, a Chinese saying. They say the only four-legged thing you don't eat is a chair. So essentially, we'll talk about that later on the Chinese. Food is very simple. We're talking about macronutrients and micronutrients. The macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and the micronutrients are the minerals and vitamins. We also have health benefiting compounds called phytonutrients, and examples are polyphenols, which are found in vegetables and fruits, and we'll talk about that later as well. So what happens when you eat? When you eat, your food gets digested. The carbohydrates or complex carbohydrates get broken down into simple sugars, fats get broken down into fatty acids, and proteins get broken down into amino acids for absorption. Now, the blood sugar levels rise depending on to different degrees, depending on what you eat. So if you eat a high sugar meal, then your sugar rise is higher. So when you eat, your sugar levels rise, the pancreas produces insulin, and insulin's role is to move sugar from the blood into the cells. Now, if you eat a high sugar diet, your insulin levels raise very high due to a high level of sugar. And if that continues chronically over a long period of time, your cells don't respond to insulin anymore. This is called insulin resistance. So eating the food is not only about sugars, it's also about inflammation. And inflammation can cause... Close the door. Sorry about that, my daughter just came in. Inflammation can actually cause obesity, and not only, but a vast array of chronic disease. In fact, chronic inflammation is a driver of chronic disease. So you can get osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, infections, asthma, COPD, ulcerative colitis, cardiovascular disease, all from inflammation. Inflammation can also lead to a condition called metabolic syndrome. Now, what's metabolic syndrome? Essentially a group of 5 things. Excess belly fat. So if you see anyone walking on the high street or anywhere with a big tummy, they've got excess belly fat. High blood sugar, a high blood pressure, high triglycerides, which is a kind of fat, and low HDL. HDL is a good cholesterol. So in a metabolic syndrome, you've got a low HDL, which is not good. So let's say, for example, you're at home, you develop symptoms and you go to see your doctor, and your doctor tells you after a blood test, you've got diabetes. Now, what can you do? Now, this is an important bit. So we're talking about type 2 diabetes here. The main rationale for treating type 2 diabetes is to lose weight. And the best thing you can do is to go on a diet high in leafy green vegetables. And these are low in calories and high in nutrients. The second thing you can do is have cold water fish. we're talking about salmon, sardines, and mackerel, for example. And no, tilapia is not one of them. So these cold water fish contain omega-3 fats. These are essential fatty acids which reduce inflammation in the body. Remember, we want to reduce it. You can also have fruits as a diabetic, but you need to go on a low glycemic index fruit. Now, what do I mean by glycemic index? It's how high sugar levels rise after a meal. So we're talking about berries here. So all the fruit we like mangoes and pineapples and oranges, we need to avoid those if you're diagnosed with diabetes or a high sugar level. Now, limit processed food, very important. With bread, for example, is a processed food, to about 4 teaspoons of sugar. So you want to avoid bread, things like toast, bread in the morning, just avoid them. The last but not least, avoid fruit juices. Now, fruit juices are full of sugar. It's one thing eating fruit, but it's another thing having fruit juice. The fruit juice hasn't got the fiber, and the fiber in the fruit juice helps moderate the rise in the sugar levels. So the fruit juice without the fiber causes a high sugar spike. Another quick example, a glass of orange juice contains an almost the same amount of sugar as a glass of standard cola. So your doctor tells you you've got high blood pressure. You've taken your blood pressure at home, it's high. You go to the surgery, it's still high. What can you do? Again, weight loss. So we're talking about low calorie, high nutrient foods like leafy green vegetables as well. Now, I encourage nuts and seeds. Those contain the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats we talked about before, but they also contain antioxidants. And those are quite important. We'll see why. Again, cold water fish like sardines, mackerel, salmon, and herring, they contain omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory, and also go on a low sodium, high potassium diet. So a simple vegetable is celery. You can have celery or celery juice. That's quite good for you. So you've got chest pain, you go to your doctor, and you get put on the right medication. However, to prevent a further heart attack, or to even prevent you getting a heart attack in the first place, again, you want to lose weight. So we're talking of the same leafy green vegetables again, nuts and seeds that contain omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants, sardines, mackerel, and salmon as cold water fish, but also avoid refined vegetable oils. Now I'm talking about sunflower oil, corn oil, and peanut oil. That's not good for you. They cause inflammation because due to the way they're refined, they're processed, they have very bad fats in them. So remember, the pathogenesis of how a heart attack gets formed, you get a bad cholesterol called LDL in the arteries. Now the LDL needs to be oxidized to actually become active. So the omega-3 fats and the antioxidants will prevent this oxidation in a way. Now, arthritis, inflammation of the joints. Again, if we were talking about knees or hips, you want to lose weight because there's lots of stress on the joints. So leafy green vegetables, of course, those are very important always, but avoid nightshades. Now, these are things like tomatoes and eggplants and peppers. Those can cause inflammation in the joints in many patients. You also want to increase the amount of cruciferous vegetables. We're talking about broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. They have high sulfur levels, and that's quite good with arthritic patients. Again, we've got the omega-3 fats, which are very important, which you can get from the nuts or you can get from the fish. So here's a big one, and this is almost like my specialty in a way, digestive disorders. So gallstones. Gallstones are really formed due to a lack of fiber. So again, you want those green leafy vegetables from fruit or vegetable, which have lots of fiber in them. A very important one, avoid fried foods. So if you go to a party, avoid the puff and things like that, or fried plantains. It's quite bad for you if you have gallstones. Avoid all forms of sugar and also meat. Moderate amount of meat, not too much meat. So IBS, very, very common. IBS is, I think every day I see at least 2 or 3 IBS patients. So we talk about irritable bowel disease, sorry. So again, leafy green vegetables are high in fiber and also important polyphenols, which we mentioned before. The fiber get digested by your gut bacteria as well as the polyphenols, and that's quite important for your overall gut health. I normally put these patients on an elimination diet. So no sugar, no gluten, and no dairy. That's very important, those three things, especially gluten. It can be inflammatory and cause problems. So if you have IBS, avoid pizza, pasta, and anything with white flour, because that's going to cause real problems. There's a last category, which we call FODMAPs. It's a special kind, it's a group of foods, which I don't really want to go into because a lot of our Cameroonian cooking encompasses FODMAPs. There's just no point talking about them. If not, we'll just starve to death, basically. So last but not least, we can't have a talk without COVID-19. Now, lots of studies have shown having metabolic syndrome increases the risk of having COVID-19 and partly explains the rise of COVID-19 in ethnic minorities, because many of us seem to have metabolic syndrome. So the good news about that is we know what to do to reduce metabolic syndrome, which we've talked about. And that is me for today. Thank you very much. And a shameless plug, my book available online, How to Stay Ahead of Your Doctor and Influence Your Health. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Asong. Yes, we'll take some questions now. If you can, yeah, perfect. You're already stopping sharing your screen. So yes, very useful presentation there on the foods and on how foods can help us prevent disease and reverse disease. And I was also just wondering, in your experience as well, Dr. Asong, you know, we're both GPs, we see lots of patients that come in, they have diabetes and they have been able to reverse it with good diet. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and what kind of percentage do you see in your own practice of patients that have successfully been able to reverse their diabetes with the diet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure about exact percentages, so I pick and choose, unfortunately, who to talk to about diet. Some patients want a quick fix. They've got diabetes, they want a tablet. No matter what you tell them, they just say yes, 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 and they never really follow. But some patients are quite enlightened, let me say, and they start asking you questions about diet. And the ones who engage have better outcomes, but I haven't really got any percentages. But I always try diet initially, but they normally say, I like chocolate, I like cakes, I like biscuits, or I'm 40, there's nothing else to live for apart from my food. If they say that, then sometimes it's a losing battle. But if they want to engage and they're really asking questions, those ones tend to do very well. So, yeah.
Perfect. And I think one of our attendees said he wasn't able to hear you when you spoke about diabetes and the specific diet that should be followed, which is appropriate since I just asked you that. But
Yeah.
yes, if you could just repeat in terms of the diet that you should use when you have diabetes.
Yeah, so you want to lose weight. So lots of fiber, leafy green vegetables and fruits, low glycemic index fruit, because you don't want sugar levels being too high. So fiber to lose weight, low glycemic index fruit, avoid processed food, which have lots of sugar in them. So those are the three main ones.
Lovely. And of course, you mentioned COVID. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I was also wondering about, you know, what specific foods that you are sort of recommending, things that are going to be able to boost our immune system during this time.
Food, I think it's the same thing. Essentially, leafy green vegetables. They've got, you know, the minerals and the vitamins. So, and also I think a high proportion of raw foods as well, because those have enzymes and some of the vitamins can be destroyed in heat. So maybe salads, you know, maybe every day if you can. And again, cold water fish, you've got the right anti-inflammatory oils as well, the omega-3s.
Mhm.
I think what I said in the whole talk applies to COVID-19 because you
Mm.
want to reduce metabolic syndrome and reduce your inflammation in the body. That's the main rationale. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Asong. I'm sure there'll be more questions for you, which we can take at the end of the overall talk. So many thanks again. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Lorraine Niba. She is a director of Global Foods Systems Knowledge Management at Ingredion Incorporated. This is a Fortune 500 company that manufactures ingredients for the food, beverage, and personal care industries. She's also the founder of Kua Women's Foundation, a non-profit organization with the mission of empowering African girls and young women in science, business, and leadership. She was also previously a global director, nutrition innovation, leading Ingredion's global nutrition platform and a cross-functional team of scientists, nutritionists, and marketing managers. She began her career as an assistant professor in the Department of Human Nutrition, Foods and Exercise at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, where she has taught courses and supervised graduate students and led the Nutritional Carbohydrates Research Lab. So lots and lots of experience here. And she also holds a BSc in biochemistry from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, a PhD in food science from the University of Maryland, College Park, MD, and an MBA from the LaSalle University School of Business, Philadelphia. She has published several books, book chapters, several papers, and presented at various scientific conferences. And she's also held leadership roles in various professional organizations and served as a member of the External Advisory Committee of the Human Nutrition and Foods Department at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce her to you. And as you can see, she's got all the experience, and I'm really looking forward to this talk. But most importantly, I went to the same school that she went to, so that's really lovely. So Lord's College. So I had to plug that in. Over to you, Dr. Niba.
So thank you, Linda, for that wonderful introduction. Always very important to stress that we're from Lourdes, right? I think that was the most important part of my bio. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. And greetings, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. It truly is an honor and a pleasure to be on this panel, speaking with you all about something that I love and that has been part of my entire academic and professional career. And actually my talk is very complementary with Dr. Leke's, right? It follows very nicely. So I think as we kind of go through, it will hopefully kind of really concretize and make sense for all of you. So I just want to start off with saying that, obviously processed foods in general, we sort of see a lot of disease conditions that are associated with processed foods, right? When you sort of move from eating natural foods and things that are closer to sort of our paleo diet and our original diets, you sort of start seeing all these disease conditions. But what the food industry also tries to do is to make sure that we concentrate nutrients in a way that is more functional and more accessible. So I've been very fortunate in my career, even though I'm a food scientist by training, to always be in nutrition, right? I've taught nutrition, I've led nutrition programs. So I do want you to keep that at the back of your mind as we go through the talk today. The other thing is that I'm going to talk about two specific nutrients, which in fact, again, Dr. Asong brought up in his talk, fiber in particular, and protein, because those are two of the most important macronutrients. And so I will use some technical terms, not because I want to confuse anybody or make it seem complicated, but because we're increasingly seeing this terminology on food products, we're increasingly seeing them on the internet, and I want you to become familiar with them, as you see them on products, and hopefully kind of make sense of them. And obviously, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if there's something that you don't understand, by all means, feel free to shoot a question across. So today we're going to talk about two big areas. The first one is dietary fiber, like I said, and we're going to hone in on a specific area of fiber. So a lot of these macronutrients tend to have multiple types because they're everywhere, right? They're in foods. That's why they're called macro. And so you have a huge class of dietary fibers. And today we're going to hone in on a very specific kind of dietary fiber that is very, very important physiologically and very helpful for digestive health. And those are called prebiotics. So you've probably seen the term probiotics. Probiotics are more common. You see those, in supplements. You've probably read about them. But probiotics are only effective if you have prebiotics as well. So we're going to talk about prebiotic fibers. And in summary, these are just fibers that are fermentable. So dietary fibers are very different. Some of them are just structural. You just get them because you're able to get the bulk. But there's others that are actually fermented and so have an effect on the body. And those are called prebiotics. So believe it or not, green plantain is actually one of the most abundant sources of fermentable fiber. So this is something that wasn't actually very known. The science is fairly new. But resistant starch in green plantain is very beneficial for a ton of things. But particularly, it's liked a lot by good bacteria. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And then the other area that is emerging a little bit more right now is plant-based protein. So protein is another macronutrient. Protein is very important for all kinds of things, your skin, your hair, structurally for energy. But overwhelmingly in the modern world, we eat a lot of animal-based protein, especially in the West. And so we're seeing this new movement towards plant-based protein for health and nutrition, for sustainability, for all kinds of reasons. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about plant-based protein and why plant-based protein sort of has some advantages over animal protein. And I think, again, Dr. Leke talked about heart health and some of these problems that you have when you consume meat. And the richest source of plant-based protein today is soybean. So soybean protein has been extracted, has been concentrated. It's very high in terms of nutritional quality, very similar to, say, egg protein or some of the animal proteins. And those are very commonly available. So why are these important? We're going to talk a little bit about the physiological benefits. And one of them is digestive health, right? So digestive health is very, very common. There's all kinds of aspects of it, all the way from your stomach, your gut, every part of it, down to your large intestine. And what has been found is that, how your intestine functions also influences other things like your immune health and even bone health. Because if your intestines are not healthy, then that affects absorption of other nutrients. Or if your intestines are very good and you have really good absorption, then that also impacts your health. So digestive health is very, very important. And also metabolic health overall. Again, something that was referenced by Dr. Leke, and the fact that, when you think about weight and heart health, all of these are very interconnected. And that is where you kind of have the benefits of plant-based protein versus animal protein, which comes with all kinds of, it comes with cholesterol, it comes with metabolites, it comes with all kinds of additional things that you do not have in plants. So the first one we're going to talk about are prebiotics. And this is a term that has been around for a very long time in the science community. Not very common outside of the science community or among people, but it's actually been a part of our lives. So what are prebiotics? Very important to remember, it is a type of fiber, so they're not digested by your body. That's all that fiber is. Fiber is everything that is not digested by your body. The way we were made, we have these components that is not digested. But prebiotics are actually fermented. So in the large intestine, when we're born, we actually have bacteria in our large intestine, believe it or not, right? It's God's way of giving us immunity. So we're born with good bacteria in the large intestine. And that is why breast milk is actually the first source of prebiotics. So breast milk has what is called human milk oligosaccharides. So babies actually don't get sick right away. They don't get infections, even though they're not on antibiotics. because when they're born, they have good bacteria and they get breast milk that feeds the good bacteria. So we actually have a natural immune system and a natural healthy digestive tract all the way from birth. Now, unfortunately, as we grow up and we begin eating different kinds of things and we, our diet gets a little bit more complicated, we tend to kill off the good bacteria because we're sort of getting things that are not healthy for them. And so what we have to do is to actively find ways of increasing our intake of, again, the prebiotic fibers, the good fibers. Fortunately, in our traditional African diets, we have a lot of foods that have them. Okra is a very good source. Carrots, beans, all of the different kinds of legumes and beans are actually very rich in oligosaccharides and fermentable fiber. Watermelon, onions, garlic, and I keep going back to plantain because plantain is very good for a lot of things, green plantain. And so what happens is that when you have prebiotics, they act as food for the good bacteria, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And that results in a healthier colon, right? A healthier intestine. And if your intestine is healthy, that then helps with other things like calcium absorption. It helps with absorption overall. It just helps with having a more robust intestine overall. And it actually helps to reduce uptake of some things that may be harmful for you. Because they actually find out that the cells that are lining your colon become very healthy when you have an abundance of good bacteria. So probiotics are complementary to prebiotics, like I said, because the prebiotics are food for the good bacteria, right? Now I know there's a lot of probiotics, supplements. People go out and buy them. People ask me about probiotics all the time. That's great. But as I showed you in the previous slide, if you take probiotics and you don't feed the probiotics, it's actually not a lot of help. You're just going to have to keep buying lots and lots of them because what you want to do is cultivate a healthy ecosystem, cultivate a healthy environment in your colon. So you do want to have this balance where you have the bacteria and you also make sure that the bacteria are feeding and growing. So what are these bacteria? Very important to know that they have to be live. So when you go out to buy a food that says it has probiotics, you want to make sure that the label says live cultures, because if they're dead, from processing, then they're no good. So you want to be able to be sure that you have, they're live, so they can multiply. The most common ones that you're going to see on product labels are lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. Those are the ones that have been studied the most. Those are bifidobacteria in particular, tend to have a lot of the benefits, but there are countless others that are still being studied. But again, these are the most common that you would typically see on a product label. And so because there are different bacteria, they have different mechanisms, they work in different ways. In my next slide, I'm actually going to explain that a little bit more. But I wanted to talk about the foods where you will most commonly find them. So grains tend to actually, when you ferment grains, this is just a woman, roasting millet. So as you know, in a lot of our tropical cultures, we have a lot of different grains that we ferment. So a lot of the fermented grains will tend to have live cultures. I have some foods here that I'm always hesitant about talking about, mainly bobolo and pap. So these are good because they have good bacteria, but they're not very good because they're high in carbohydrates, right? So they're not very healthy foods. So it is a balance. So you do want to be careful. It is true, they're sources of probiotics, but are they the best sources? Probably not, because these are processed carbohydrates. They're not very good for you, especially if you have a slow metabolism or you're prone to not metabolizing carbohydrates very well. So this is more for knowledge sake, to know that fermented foods like bobolo and pap have a lot of good bacteria, but it's a balance around how much you eat them because they're also very caloric and they're just not good for you. And then of course we have fermented corn beer. So again, hopefully people don't drink that I think they're more for recreational purposes, but they have good bacteria. So again, just so you know, in our culture, we've actually had this, even though the science is new, but a lot of traditional cultures have actually had fermented foods, and they've had this good bacteria. And then more in terms of modern times, we have, dietary supplements, and we have yogurt, yogurts that tend to have a lot of these live cultures as well. So why are these beneficial, and how do they really work? So if you think about, when you take in a prebiotic plus a probiotic, the first thing that it does is that it reduces the bad bacteria in your colon. So it's almost as if they're competing. And it's actually a true competition, because bacteria, they colonize your intestine. They actually find a place to be in your intestine. And so if you have crowding, which is what happens when you now have probiotics and prebiotics, you have an excess of good bacteria. They actually crowd out the bad bacteria. So you actually do have an increase of good bacteria versus bad bacteria. Your colon becomes healthier. And so it protects your colon because the fermentation produces energy that is good for the cells in the colon. Also, because you reduce pH, again, fermentation causes an acidic environment, and you're reducing the pH, which is very good for mineral absorption. So there's actually been a lot of studies that have shown that you actually have an enhanced absorption of calcium when you have prebiotics and probiotics. And so a lot of these supplements, you will see them make the claim around bone health, and it's really tied to both calcium and potassium absorption. And finally, as I mentioned, energy, right? So sometimes you will hear people say when they have diets that are high in fiber, they don't get hungry as much. That's because fermentation actually produces energy. And so you feel a little bit full, and you feel a little bit more energized versus feeling very hungry. Okay. So hopefully you kind of see the benefits of these very specific kinds of fiber. And again, they're very available in our diet. So the last thing I did just want to talk about was plant-based protein, as I mentioned. And again, as you can see, it's actually everywhere, right? So I think plant-based protein is probably new in the West. But I think for a lot of cultures where, we've been used to plant-based foods anyways, we've actually been able to get a lot of protein. We've just never been able to quantify it and actually measure it and be aware. But as you see, soybean is one. There's a lot of soybean now consumed in Cameroon, in West Africa. Pumpkin seed, egusi, is actually very high in protein. Mushrooms, a lot of legumes, a lot of beans, a lot of grains, so millet, sorghum, but even fruits. So fruits like guava, avocado, and of course nuts like peanuts are also very high in plant-based protein. Now, as is always the case with whole foods, you do want to be aware that, sometimes it does come with other components that may not. For instance, nuts are very caloric. So peanuts are great, but you do not want to eat a lot of peanuts because they're very high in calories. So again, you just want to be aware of that. Now, the benefits of protein is that protein is your primary source of energy. So very, very important. Also, plant-based proteins don't have cholesterol, right? Plants do not have cholesterol. So if you take, meat-based proteins, if you take meats in general, those come with cholesterol, eggs, beef, everything else. But plant-based proteins do not have any cholesterol. So that helps a lot with heart health overall. They tend to be lower calories in general. I do have to caution, because again, I see a lot of our community, people moving towards going to the grocery store and they buy, say, like a burger, a plant-based burger or plant-based chicken wings. Be aware that, so look at the calorie content, because sometimes in order to form those products, they use additives, and they may use carbohydrates, and they may use other components where it may end up being a high calorie product. So in general, isolated plant protein is lower in calories. But if you're buying a packaged burger, plant-based burger, or a packaged plant-based whatever, sausage, you just want to make sure that you look at the label and be sure that it is not high in calories. And of course, plants are very high in fiber, in antioxidants, in a lot of other natural components that come with the food. So that is really a benefit over a lot of the animal proteins. And so as you see on there, I have a lot of the sources. These are all very, very available, and something that is very easy to incorporate into the diet. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niba, Dr. Lorraine. It was really, really interesting, especially the bit about the bobolo. A lot of us, a lot of us like that. I guess you would say that, if we wanted to have that, you could perhaps have that in moderation, as part of, as a prebiotic. So I was really interested in hearing that. I also wonder, here in the UK, we have lots of probiotics on the shelves. Are you aware of similar sort of products that we have in Cameroon if people just want to buy a little small container and drink and think they've had it rather than getting it naturally? I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I know that now we have a lot of supplements in Cameroon. In fact, I was in Cameroon earlier this year and people tried to sell me supplements everywhere. So I will find out, Linda, and make sure that I follow up and we get that information available. I'm positive that there are likely supplements in Cameroon, probiotic supplements, because we now have a lot of supplements. For this presentation, I tried to find some, and I think I found like a couple of brands of yogurt. I did not include them in my presentation just because I couldn't find the scientific information, and I'm always very cautious about that. But I do know that there's brands of yogurt in Cameroon that use the word probiotic. But in terms of supplements, that's absolutely something that we could try to find. You could try to find out. I have to imagine with the explosion of the supplement market now in Cameroon that those are likely available, and probably in Nigeria as well.
Yes, and I mean, a lot of your talk was on sort of plant-based proteins and things, and there is this fad now. A lot of people are trying to go vegan or any type of vegetarian, lacto-vegetarian, ovo, so many types, and of course, when people are going vegan or using more plant-based, I tend to find that in my practice that sometimes they get deficient in vitamins, B12, iron. And I know we're probably going to have a talk about this at some point, but I've just wondered as to the patients that probably, or the audience members that want to sort of change their diet, stop eating a lot of meat and fish, reduce the metabolic risk of getting metabolic syndrome. What kind of things would you advise them to do to make sure that they don't get deficient?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I do want to point out, and you're absolutely right, Linda. So remember, we're omnivores, right? We were not created to be vegan, right? We don't have digestive systems are not made to entirely live on plants. So I do know people want to lose weight and there's all kinds of concerns, but a vegan diet is really not optimal because you're going to get a lot of deficiencies. Again, remember, plants are very difficult to digest. That's why goats and cows have a much larger stomach than we do because you need a lot more enzymes. It's very different. So if you choose to go on a vegan diet, you just have to be very structured about it. I wouldn't recommend it 100%. You may want to think about doing it for a time. But my approach has always been, think about a few days a week, maybe become, on 3 or 4 days a week, you don't eat meat. Everything really has to be about balance because it's about your whole lifestyle versus being an extremist. So it's very important. There's a lot of things, milk is really the ideal human food. That's why we get it first. So you always want to make sure that your vitamins are right. A lot of the minerals, plants have minerals, but those are typically not bioavailable because it takes a long time for your body to break them down, to absorb them. So the absorption is not as efficient. You want to make sure that you're taking your vitamins, you're taking your minerals, you're making sure that, even your macronutrients as well. So it's very, very important, if you choose to go on a vegan diet, to be aware that you're likely going to face a lot of these deficiencies. The other thing I want to caution, and this may not be very good news, is to know that, a lot of the new plant-based sources are new to our diet. So people do not yet know what the allergens may be. Whenever a food is new, it takes time for your body to respond to it. So then there are already people, I think Dr. Leke talked about irritable bowel, IBS, which means your stomach just doesn't feel good. So you're not sick enough to go to the doctor, but you just don't feel good. And a lot of times that's your body reacting to something new. So if you're switching your diet drastically, And the more you do this, then your stomach becomes more irritated, your intestines become more irritated. So it is good to change and manage your diet, but always think about it holistically. Always think about it as a lifestyle thing, and always make sure that there's balance. And most importantly, especially as we get older, you want to make sure that you're taking your vitamins, you're taking your minerals, you're taking a lot of these micronutrients that are really very important for your body function overall.
Thank you so much. Before we move to our next speaker, we've got lots of questions just come in. I think we can take one before we go to the next speaker. So this is from Christine Kemgu. We have to avoid processed foods, but we see meat being grown in the lab. We see all these vegetable capsules claiming to have 12 different vegetables. What is the future of raw food?
Yeah, so the most important thing, I'm very excited, I have to say, I'm very excited that people are choosing to become educated about what they eat, right? I think in the past, we kind of just, did everything. People were very educated about medications. They kind of knew what they took for if they were sick, but went into the store, and if there was a promotion, they grabbed stuff off of the shelf. So there's a lot of, I will be honest with you, a lot of what we call mad scientists out there, right? There's people who try stuff. So I'm not an advocate of lab-grown meat. There's people who maybe need it. There's always somebody who is very protein deficient. There's always extreme conditions for people who need these hyper-processed foods. Let's think about that. But for us especially, I keep saying this, for a lot of the non-Western cultures, already in our diet, we have a lot of healthy components, right? Because again, remember, our diet was very close to the paleo diet. It was very close to the ground. It was very agrarian. We were still very familiar with plants. Even when we process, think about all the fermented foods in our culture. So you definitely want to avoid, if something is new, if it hasn't been proven, do not go on YouTube and automatically adopt a diet because somebody tells a good story. First of all, start with your culture. I can't say it enough. Dr. Leke talked about the green vegetables that we have. I kept talking about plantain because there's not a lot of science, right? I published on plantain, but there's not a lot of people who've published on it. And that's one of the most nutritious and healthiest foods that we have. So let's look at our culture. A lot of these new things that are coming out, there's a market for it, but they've not been proven at all. So the raw food diet is not ideal. That was the question. Like I said, our bodies are not meant to digest raw food. You're going to be deficient, but we do also have to make sure that we have a balance and a more holistic approach, in as we look at things and as we try new foods.
Thank you so much for that brilliant response. So without further ado, to our third and final speaker, Mrs. Lydia Nsutebu. Lydia Nsutebu graduated from the University of Yaoundé, Cameroon, with a bachelor's degree in private law. She's also a certified psychiatric nurse from Leeds University here in the UK. She's vibrant, dynamic, and inspirational. She's passionate about healthy living and as well as cooking. She is the founder of a Facebook group known as Exotic Flavours and Fitness. I'm also a member of that one. She uses the group to motivate and coach members to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Her passion for cooking drove her to co-write a cookbook called The Ultimate Guide to Exciting Low-Carb Recipes with her sister. The cookbook is universal and includes breathtaking recipes, both of African and Western cuisine. And again, I have that and I can vouch that it's quite easy to follow. She has been a guest speaker on TV and radio stations in Cameroon, as well as corporate events. And she's currently living in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, with her family, which is where she is now. So very lovely to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It is really a pleasure for me to be here, a real privilege. And today I would like us to talk, my topic is actually on how to make the African cuisine more healthy. And if I must say, our cuisine is really rich in nutrients, and it also depends on how you cook it and how you eat it. You can enjoy Cameroon food depending on your reduction in the carbohydrates, your reduction in the calories, and your portion control. As you know, coming from Cameroon, I could literally say that we have grown to know that we live on carbohydrates. And we now know today how bad it can be if we eat a lot of carbohydrates, especially with our weight. We know carbohydrates is broken down into sugars and stored as fat. So it is important that we kind of know and watch our portion when it comes to carbohydrates. The first thing I would like to talk about, one of the meals that is popular in Cameroon is ndole. We know we love our ndole, and ndole is rich. The groundnut in the ndole is rich in protein, and this is plant-based. You've heard Dr. Lorraine and Dr. Leke talk about plant-based food. Ndole is rich in groundnuts. It is also rich in oil. So these are fats, and this is very high in calories. Now, the person who is counting their calories may find ndole unhealthy, whereas you have another person who may be watching, let's say, their carbohydrates, and even though you do have carbohydrates in groundnuts, but the fat is higher. So for instance, I'll take an example of myself. I do follow a low carbohydrate lifestyle. And if I look at ndole, I'm not going to fret very much about this ndole, even though it has the oils and it has the granules. And what my concern would be, what am I going to be eating this ndole with? What side would I be eating it with? Is it with ripe plantains or is it with dodo? So now, I will be eating this ndole with something like pumpkin. Are you with me? So I wouldn't find ndole very unhealthy. Whereas you who is on a high calorie count would find ndole unhealthy. And then you have another person who could eat whatever they want to eat. Now they just need to count their portion. So when you're making your ndole, it depends where you fall. You can cut back on the groundnut and the oil to make it healthy for you. Another thing I would like to talk about ndole is the groundnut that we use. It is important that we use our groundnut whole. That's where you really maximize the nutrients that is based, especially the skin of our groundnuts. It's full of antioxidants. But unfortunately, when we cook ndole, we tend to boil it, take the peel off, and we throw it away. And this is the treasure of the meal that we are throwing away. So next time you try to cook your ndole, why don't you incorporate the peels? Groundnut comes in different colors. You can find white groundnuts, you can find brown, and you can also find red groundnuts. And if you use the white groundnut, for instance, honestly, there is no difference, and you wouldn't be compromising the taste by taking the skin off. So that's one tip I have for ndole. And if we go back now to another popular meal, which is eru, we know again how much oil eru takes. It is, many people will love to see it swim. Now, I would not be afraid of eru because of the oil. Why? Because I am on a low carbohydrate lifestyle, and I know that if my body takes this fat, it is going to break it down in energy. I will reduce my carbohydrate portion. So if you give me a plate of eru, for instance, and it's got the oil, and don't forget this is plant-based oil, I would be looking at having this eru with something like cauliflower fufu or any vegetable fufu. You've got cauliflower, you've got broccoli fufu, and you've got spinach fufu. You can make fufu out of any vegetable you like. So yeah, give me the cauliflower, give me the cabbage fufu, and I'll eat it with my eru. But you who is counting your calories and you are on a low calorie diet, you really want to reduce your arrow or the oil you have in your arrow really much. So don't forget, you've got the arrow, which is really high in, it's a leafy green, it is high in vitamins and antioxidants, but you are afraid of the oil. So watch that. Now, the third thing I would like us to talk about is beans. Beans is very, very popular in Cameroon and commonly eaten across the country. And there are different types of beans. We've got green beans. Let me start off with green beans. You've got, I'm just naming a few of the different types of beans here. So in Cameroon, yes, we do have green beans. You do have kidney beans, which is very popular. You have black beans, and you also have black-eyed beans. So I'm going to talk on this different legumes or different types of beans. Now, beans are a rich source of protein, and people get kind of confused here sometimes because they just go in for, you know, to eat the beans knowing that it is protein they are eating, which is good, which I do not dispute. However, you've got to understand that these beans is actually very high in carbohydrates. So if you are following a low carbohydrate lifestyle, you've got to be very careful with the kind of beans you're eating. Let me take, for instance, the kidney beans and the black-eyed beans. You've got about 60 grams of carbohydrate in these beans. And yeah, you've got about in 100 grams, of beans. So you've got to be careful there. And then now, if you look at black-eyed beans has 19 grams. When I talk of black-eyed beans, I am referring to the kind of beans that we use back home to cook cocky beans, to make your mai, and to make your akra beans. So if you were watching your carbohydrate intake, I would advise you, or I would recommend the black-eyed beans. And for you who is watching your calories, well, you've got to watch the oils that you're having, and you've got to know as well that this beans is high in carbohydrates. So when you take your black-eyed beans, for instance, there's many people out there who do not really realize that you could use cocky beans, that's the black-eyed beans. You could use your cocky beans, you could cook it as you cook kidney beans. That's in a beans stew. And then you can find a side to go with it. So you see how people would eat puff and beans? Now, I could recommend, especially if you're on a low-calorie diet, to eat the black-eyed beans, which you've made in beans stew. You can have that with akra beans, for instance. And now, when you are cooking your cocky beans, again, the same problem that we have with making dole, people will steep the beans, they will wash it, and they're gonna throw away the skin. But this skin is something that will really help us with the fiber and the antioxidants. So you shouldn't be throwing these beans, the skin. And the black-eyed beans is white in color. So, which means that when you grind these beans, you wouldn't even know that you have used the skin of the beans. When you cook it, like in a bean stew, you do eat it whole. That's what we're encouraging, that people eat food whole. Eat your groundnuts whole, eat your beans whole. If I go now to cocky beans, you who is counting your calories, for instance, you are afraid of oil, you're afraid of fat. Now, one of the little things you can do if you're making your cocky beans is you could put a little bit of turmeric powder, and that's going to give it a nice yellow color, which means you could really reduce the amount of oil you are putting in these cocky beans now. And honestly, it's not going to compromise the taste. The same as your mai. If you're making mai, depending on the color that you want your mai to give, you can also add this turmeric powder, which also, I mean, it's also got health benefits. Or you could add some red peppers. I'm talking about red bell peppers. This would give your mai a nice pink color. And again, to uplift or take your cocky a little bit up, you know, in nutrients, you could garnish it. Garnish it with some green leaves like spinach or kale, and that would take and increase the nutrients in your coffee beans. So that's it for beans. And let me go over now to another thing that's very commonly eaten in Cameroon, which is corn. Now we eat corn in different forms. We boil it, we roast it, we steam it, and we have pap from corn, we have the coffee corn, and a lot of things. How many people know that there is a little difference between the white corn and the yellow corn? There is a difference in nutrients. So the yellow corn is slightly more nutritive because you've got this beta-carotene in the yellow corn that digests in our system vitamin A. So it's actually good and better for you to eat yellow corn. But a lot of times you see people make their fufu corn, it is all shining, it's all white. You fail to understand that the yellow one is actually better. And another thing, that it's not only with the yellow corn, but when you were cooking your coffee corn, no, not your coffee corn, when you are cooking your fufu corn, for instance, you sieve this corn, and what happens to what we locally call the kende, we take this kende and we throw away. So this is the fiber again that we are throwing away that's going to help our system, our digestive system. So it is nice when you're cooking your coffee corn, make sure that your fufu corn, make sure that you have the kende in this fufu corn. Your coffee corn is good because you're cooking it whole. You're cooking the corn whole. So again, with the oil, somebody who is afraid of oil, you can use the same trick you used with the coffee beans. You put a little bit of turmeric powder to lift it up. If you're cooking your coffee corn with yellow corn, you don't even need this to do this because you would not need a lot of oil to cook your coffee corn. Again, you want to garnish your coffee corn with some green leaves, some spinach, some kale or cocoa leaf, which we have in Cameroon. Now, this takes me to okra. We had Dr. Niba talk a lot about okra. Okra is commonly found in Cameroon, and it is such a nutrient-dense food. You can cook it in different ways. You can up it again with a little bit of melon seeds. You can dip in a bit of palm oil, and yet you could have your okra without any oil at all, just a simple pepper soup okra. And when you go now to have it with your cauliflower fufu or your cabbage fufu, you're good to go. Or even your water fufu, you could have it with a bit of the water fufu or your gari, especially if you are just watching your portion. It's healthy and it's good. Now, one thing I would like us to talk about is the fruits and vegetables. We had Dr. Leke mention fruits. There are different types of fruits in Cameroon, and our tropical fruits are very, very high in sugar, a lot of them. However, we can have fruits that are low in sugar, and that's not going to spike our blood sugar. We've got, for instance, the berries. I know we've got more of berries in the Western world, but we do find them in Cameroon nowadays. Strawberries are very good for people. They are low in calories, they're low in carbohydrates. You've also got things like raspberries. Watermelon is another good fruit that you could have. You've got the citrus fruits, which are low in sugar, especially grapefruits. Grapefruit is really good for you. Another fruit that we could recommend, especially when you're watching your sugar, is lemons and limes. So those are some of the fruits you want to be going in for when you're watching the amount of sugar you take. We've got nuts on the other side. Nuts are another good way of eating or adding your nutrients to your food. You could have your nuts in salads. We've got a wide variety of vegetables in Cameroon, for instance. A wide variety, we could have different types of salads. And you could have a bowl of salad, for instance, with nuts in, with avocados, with eggs, and you have a dish that is full of nutrients. And when you eat this, believe you me, you are going to stay full for a long time. So it's nothing to do with the salad, or it doesn't keep me full. No, it depends on how you make the salad. You can add lots of different things to your salad to help keep it, make you fuller for longer. You could add some chicken, you could add some beef, you could add some fish, some sardines, some tuna, and like I said, eggs, avocado, and nuts. When I am talking about nuts, again, you've got to be careful because they've got, they can be quite high in fat, and some of them are also very high in carbohydrates. So we need to find a balance here. We need to know like how much are we eating. You cannot just go on eating this fruit or this nuts. Almond nuts are very good for you. They are less in carbohydrates and less in fat, especially when we want to compare them to something like cashew nuts. So you can go ahead, you can have your almond nuts, you can have your pecan nuts. These are also quite low in carbohydrates. And yeah, the fats, again, in the nuts are healthy fats. So don't be afraid. It's just that when you're counting your calories, fats are fats. So even if you are eating the healthiest oil, even if you're having your olive oil, the extra virgin oil, I tell you, if you're counting your calories, you still have to be careful. And this takes me down now to carbohydrates. We do have the simple carbohydrates and we do have the complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates remain carbohydrates. So if you're on a low carbohydrate lifestyle, you want to be avoiding your carbohydrates. You want to be avoiding especially the whites. So I'm talking about your white bread, your baguettes. I'm talking about the white flour. I'm talking about the white rice and the white pasta. You could instead opt for things like the browns, the brown bread, the brown pastas, and all whatnot. However, this is a mistake that is very common. You'll find people will come and tell you they are on low carbohydrates. However, they are eating brown bread, they are eating brown pasta or brown rice. And I'll say no. It's true it is healthy, it's slightly healthy, but when we are counting our carbohydrates, carbohydrates are carbohydrates. Just as if you are on your low calorie intake, fats are fats. So whether you're eating the olive oil, you've got to also watch the portion because the oils are high in calories. It's just that some are healthier, to put it that way. So now, talking about fruits, talking about vegetables, I would highly recommend that people go in for more vegetables than fruits. And this is because all the nutrients that you can get from your fruits, you will be getting those same nutrients from your vegetables. The only difference is you wouldn't be taking the sugar that are found in the fruits. So opt for your vegetables and be very cautious with the kind of fruits you are eating. I would like to round this up, obviously, by talking about the importance of water, drinking water, and the importance of exercising when we are talking of a healthy diet. It is actually important for you to drink water or add water to your diet. Many people don't drink enough water. Yeah, that's very good. I can see Lydia drinking her water there. I've got my glass of water here also. But many people, seriously, they go in for these fizzy drinks, which are empty calories, very high in calories that are not nutritive at all. So you go for your beer, and do you know beer is just liquid toast. So when you're drinking this beer and you're trying to avoid bread, you are basically drinking toast. Okay, so you've got the beer, which is high in calorie, and you've also got your alcohol, which is high in calorie. So let us try to be drinking a lot of water, or let's say 7 to 8 glasses of water. It all depends on how old you are. It all depends on your level of activities, but it is, I think, yeah, we are recommended to drink like 6 to 8 glasses of water. And then back to the exercises that I talked about. When you exercise, guys, you actually feel healthier. A lot of people, those of you who are trying to lose weight, it is important to incorporate some exercise in your daily routine. It will boost your energy. It is going to help you reduce some of these cardiovascular diseases. And again, it will help you relax, take off some stress, and help you sleep well. So many times, some people say they don't sleep, but part of the reason why they don't sleep is because they just don't exercise. So do drink some water, do exercise. And to conclude, I would like you to take, 3 main points that I have made. Our Cameroon diet is quite healthy. It is full of nutrients. However, you can still enjoy your ndole or your eru or whichever food you want to eat. If you control the amount of carbohydrates, you control the amount of oils, the calories, or if you go on a portion control. So that's me done, guys. I hope you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Lydia. There was just so much that you've told us. All of our audience members are so happy. There's lots of questions coming in as well. Yeah, basic, so much. So let me start with, just for me, as I said, I've got your book here, which reads The Ultimate Guide to Exciting Low Carb Recipes. We've put the link on there. There's also the link for Dr. Leke's book as well.
Okay.
In your book, and you mentioned just now about the vegetable fufu, can you just tell us how easy it is to make, and what does it taste like for those of us that haven't had it?
All right. Yes, thank you very much. The vegetable fufu, let me just take something like cauliflower or cabbage. It is the same process. You just use your fresh cauliflower, you boil it until it is nice and tender, you drain it, and you use a masher. You can put it in a food processor if you've got one, otherwise you could just simply mash it with a potato masher. And when you do that, get a teaspoon of psyllium husk. Remember, psyllium husk is high fiber, and that is going to help to give it an elastic and the fufu texture that we have. So once that's done, you put it on your fire, and 5-10 minutes, you will see the texture change. From the cauliflower, when you mash it, it looks like mashed potato. But by the time you add the psyllium husk, and you put it on the fire for about 5 minutes, just keep stirring it, you'll see that the texture changes to an elastic texture. And for the taste of it, your fufu really, like in Cameroon, our fufu has a bland taste, just like your cauliflower. We don't season the cauliflower, you don't season the cabbage. You may take a little bit of getting used to, but by the time you're eating this with your ndole or with your eru, honestly, the eru is going to overshadow the taste of the cauliflower. But it is really good. It's something you should try. And when you think about the health benefits, especially when you're cutting down on your carbohydrates, honestly, it is something you would want to consider very seriously. Yeah, and it's easy to cook.
Yeah, and mentioning that area as well, you put a lot of oil and things in there. You've touched on that. I was just wondering whether you could give us like portion sizes, or how many teaspoons of red oil is enough?
I know that.
because
Yeah.
we just put and we just keep putting. So what if we're trying to reduce the amount? What would you say is a good quantity to be putting?
Right, okay. That is a very difficult question. And because the recommended amount of fat that our body needs a day, like they say, generally, especially if you are not on a low carbohydrate diet and you don't care about the fats you're eating, if you're counting your calories, really you should be taking about 5 to 6 teaspoons a day. I'm sorry, So really it's like half a liter of oil in a month, if that makes some sense. So there you go, you have it now. But I know we do take a lot of oil. Maybe you could start by reducing it a little bit. If you know you've been putting like 2 or 3 cooking spoons of oil, maybe next time you could reduce it to 2 spoons, and then you take it down to 1 spoon, bit by bit. And yeah, you could end up making your area with just a little bit of this oil. It's just something in your head, and you just have to deal with your mind. Once you can control your mind, there is nothing you cannot do. I have eaten all types of food. I have eaten beans without oil. I have eaten arrow without oil, and it is tasty. Pepper soup, for instance, sese plantains, I have eaten it without oil, but I just call it pepper soup. And that takes me to another kind of food, which is our pepper soup, which is also very good for those who are counting their calories.
Thank you for that. Now we've got a question which I think I'd like Lorraine to answer. So someone is really worried about their gari now. She wants to know what the nutritional value of the trendy drinking gari. Some people say over-processed cassava such as gari has no nutrients, hence no calories. How true is that? And she also missed the thing about the bobolo. Has it got calories?
All my favorite foods. Excellent question. So I also just wanted to add a little bit to what Lydia said about really training your mind emotionally. Because, one of the biggest challenges with food is that food is also emotional, right? We don't just eat food for the nutritional value, but food is social, food is emotional. So there's all kinds of emotions that are associated with food. That's why we develop food habits. If your mom or your grandmom. So it's very important that, you can make these changes if you decide emotionally that, I want to be healthy, we can eat this. So it is not easy, but it's doable. And I want everyone on the phone to realize that, or everyone calling in to realize that, even though we're professionals in this area, we also realize the emotional and social component of food, because a lot of with people, that's why it helps when it's your whole family making a lifestyle change.
Oh, yeah.
You're in a community making a lifestyle change, and your body and your mind can get used to eating cauliflower fufu, right? It's not impossible. I just wanted to add that because I saw that there's always a lot of angst about that. With regards to gari, I wish I had good news. Gari is not very healthy, so it is true. I think when we're in Lord's, Linda, right, they always used to say, oh, gari has no nutritional value. It is true. A lot of the starch is washed away, for when we make gari, cassava starch is water soluble. So a lot of it is washed away. But what is still left and is fermented, once you cook it, and if you've noticed, that's why when you cook gari, you can actually make it into a ball, right? Because you're now processing it in a way that it's available to your body. And when you eat gari, you feel that you've eaten real food, right? You feel heavy when you eat gari. So gari actually has, it's a high calorie food. If you really like, kowata gari is comfort food for me. So you just want to do it very sparingly, very little, as Lydia said. Unfortunately, it is a high calorie food. Bobolo as well. Bobolo is healthy in that it is fermented, and fermented foods are good for your gut, but you cannot eat too much of it. I will tell you, if I eat a whole bobolo, I literally get on the scale and I see that I have gained at least 1 or 2 pounds, right? So our bodies metabolize carbohydrates very, very quickly. That's why when you drink beer or you eat bread, you feel your body takes it up right away. So everything in moderation, just have bobolo maybe once a month, have a little bit of it if you crave it. I wish I had better news, but they're caloric. They're high calorie foods, and you know, it's going to show up in your weight.
And imagine us adding some granite and then some nido milk. It just makes it worse.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why calorie counting is good. I know Lydia talked a lot about calories, but if you find yourself on a day when you really absolutely have to have cold water gari with granite and with the milk and everything, then you have to compensate someplace else. Maybe that day you don't eat dinner, or you have a low calorie dinner, or just vegetable for dinner, right? So I'm an advocate of saying, don't abolish anything from your diet, because that's why people fall back, right? When people go back now, then again, we have this emotional attachment to food. So always just make sure that you're vigilant. If you absolutely, you know, ate 2 bobola and a huge bowl of ndole on that day, maybe for the next 2 days, then you just try to be extra careful and balance out your caloric intake.
Yeah, that very good points there. Thank you for that. Got a question for Dr. Asong there, which has been waiting for. It came from one of our viewers on YouTube, just wanting to know which foods are rich in zinc, which can help to boost immunity.
Yeah, good question. I think pumpkin seed is the one I know. Pumpkin seed, yeah. Maybe Lorraine knows another type, or Lydia. Zinc, pumpkin seed.
You're all. Can you unmute yourselves, Lorraine and Lydia?
Yeah, so absolutely, a lot of the grains, right? Grains do tend to be high in minerals. So a lot of the whole grains. I think Lydia talked quite a bit about corn, millet, sorghum. So a lot of the cereal grains tend to be high in zinc as well.
Yes, actually, we had a follow-up question to that for Lydia, which was saying that, could you please mention using melon seeds in dole, goosey seeds, I think.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, you could use melon seeds in dole actually, but you won't be calling that ndole, because when we talk of ndole, we are talking about groundnut. I'm very particular about that. But yes, when you use your melon seeds, I will call that maybe your bitter leaf soup. You want to add some ndole, some bitter leaf in, some melon seeds or egusi in your bitter leaf. Of course, by all means, you could do that. And again, you could also cook your bitter leaf without the granite or without the egusi. You could simply add some tomatoes to it. You could add some mushrooms and then your onion, and yeah, fry it like that, and it will still be good.
Lovely. Right. We still got a few. We're going to take some more questions for the next 5 minutes, and then we're going to run up. So I've got a question here about the laxative function of psyllium. Is it dose dependent? This is from Eugenie, the psyllium Hawks.
Right. You mean the one that I put in the fufu, right?
Yes. Yes.
It will depend now on the amount of cauliflower fufu you are cooking. So, but remember, you can use this psyllium husk in your juices as well. Not only in the fufu. This is just extra fiber. For instance, you see, if you're making, let's say, a green juice, we know if you use your blender, you would be having all the fiber. You are having your vegetable whole, okay? Now, there's some people who don't like this fiber, but yet they can appreciate the importance of the fiber. If you take this green veggie juice now, use your juicer and you extract all the fiber from your vegetables, you can use the psyllium husk to up your juice, your green juice. A teaspoon is very good. You just put it in and you stir it. You have to be very careful though with psyllium husk, because when it goes in, it kind of absorbs the water. So when you take psyllium husk, you have to drink plenty of water. It helps you with your digestive system. It's gonna help to send out the toxins and help your digestion, help you empty your bowels. But when you take it, please do drink plenty of water. 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoons, depending on what you are cooking or the amount of fufu you're making.
Excellent, thanks for that. One question there for Dr. Asong. What would you say is a good cutoff time to eat dinner before going to bed?
Difficult. I say maybe 8, but I don't think there's any specific time as such. It depends on what time you first ate. I was going to go to intermittent fasting, which is you need to give a long time between meals. So if, for example, you last ate at 8 p.m., then maybe, and you sleep for 8 hours, and you have breakfast at 8 a.m., then that's a good enough time. But I think I would say maybe 8 o'clock is a general time, because your body kind of slows down after a certain period. But some cultures are different. In Spain, for example, they eat very late. But they're in outdoors, lots of exercise. So it's a cultural thing as well. But I think for England anyway, I think maybe 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. And interesting, you mentioned the intermittent fasting. I think we're going to be doing, we're going to have a talk on that pretty soon, because there's a lot to be said about intermittent fasting and all the diets associated with that. But I think I would agree with you in terms of saying that, yes, 8 p.m. is a good cutoff time, especially if you're going to be in bed at 10 p.m. At least you've given yourself 2 hours of being up and not just going straight to bed.
Just a quick thing I was going to mention, because I had a few questions in the panel asking about what's the best diet for them. And I just wanted to point out, all of these are just general guidelines. Everyone is different. In fact, some people don't tolerate vegetables, believe it or not, no matter what they eat. I've got a few clients like that. And it could be a problem with their gut bacteria, for example. So you need to clean out the gut first. So if, for example, you have lots of vegetables after this talk and you feel bloated all the time, you've got to use some trial and error and see which ones you can tolerate. So just because a book says this is the best vegetable to have, it might be you don't tolerate it personally. But if in general you don't tolerate vegetables or fruit, there could be something wrong with your digestive system. And in fact, some people are now migrating to a carnivorous diet, eating only meat. And some of them are doing well on it, actually. So it's quite a difficult area. But at the end of the day, everyone is individual. So you've got to try things out for yourself. Yeah, I just thought I'd make that point.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Leke, Dr. Asong. And the final question is about how easily digested is the carbs in beans. That was sent to Lydia. I think you mentioned about the different types of beans. If you could just reiterate your point again about the beans and how digestible
Right, slow. Right. Okay. Yeah, like I said, beans is very high in carbohydrates. So people have to be careful, especially if they are on a low carbohydrate lifestyle. The digestion of beans is slow. It releases itself slowly. However, beans is beans and it is full of carbs. And do not be confused, because yes, it has proteins, but it does have a higher amount of carbohydrates than protein. So if you're on a low carbohydrate diet, I'm sorry, the beans you want to be eating is the black-eyed beans. This has low carbohydrate content.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Well, it's been really, really informative. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I was going to hand over to Dr. Ngwa so that he could tell us about our upcoming webinar. So I'll wait to get him on there. But in the meantime, while he's getting on, I would like to pass on a special thanks to everyone who has helped us in CamDoc. So especially Dr. Anna Mbene, who is our communications and social secretary. I don't know if she wants to show her face there. See the lady who has basically, if she wasn't here, this Zoom wouldn't be rerunning. We don't know how she gets it on, but she does it. And Dr. Chris Dimala, who is joining us all the way. Oh, there she is. Hello. You need to say something so we can see, they can see you. Turn on your microphone.
All right, that's me. Hello, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Mbene. And also Dr. Christian Akem. He's all the way from the US. That's how much he loves CamDoc. and he is our webmaster, and all those beautiful flyers that you see, he does them himself. So very well done to Christian, and thank you very much. Show yourself when possible. I've got Dr. Ngwa here, who is our educational lead, and those of you who joined us last time would have seen him in the last webinar, and he's going to tell you all about our upcoming webinar. Over to you, Dr. Ngwa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bello, and thanks for our panelists for 3 brilliant talks. It's been more than what I expected, and I'm sure we were not wrong in choosing the 3 best people to talk about the topic as diverse and as important as this. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. We're going to have a next webinar on the 10th of October, which is a Saturday as well, the same time, 6 p.m. And our topic will be on COVID among the healthcare professionals. As we know, those of us at the front line have suffered some casualties. We've had some people passed away, unfortunately, healthcare professionals. And we've been lucky in our association, CamDocUK, not to have lost a member, but we have quite a few of us who've been off sick. And it is very important that we have this conversation because there is the rumor or the talk of a second wave coming up. So how they coped, how they planned for it, how they cope with it, and how they survived. It's a very important conversation. It's going to be a roundtable discussion amongst 4 healthcare professionals who were infected with COVID-19 between March and May of this year. So it'd be a very important one as well for us to join. But also to say that we have a partnership with the Pacha Foundation ongoing, and at 8 p.m. we have a run of our partnership webinar that happened and will be broadcasted at 8 p.m. If you go on the chat section, I've put out the links for this webinar. It's very important. It's on domestic violence. We know it is a big bane in our community and in all communities actually, but we also know that the lockdown has caused quite a lot of chaos within families. So it's a very important topic that we should follow. And the links are on our chat section to join the conversation at 8 p.m. Thank you very much, Dr. Bello. And again, once more, thanks to the panelists for a very brilliant discussion.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ngwa. Yes, as I said, it was really very enjoyable. I was joking beforehand that all the panelists had names beginning with L, so I knew that it was going to be indeed a very special day. So I'm really grateful to all of those who attended today, all of those who asked the questions. This was being streamed on YouTube as well. We will have a recording of this stored on YouTube for those that were not able to attend. And any questions that you have, you can still post them on our website, camdocuk.org. Please follow us so that you don't miss any events from us. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram. And when you go to our YouTube channel, please subscribe and like anything on there. There is a poll that is currently being on. If you can please answer the questions there so we know how we can improve. We know if this is the sort of thing that you would like us to talk about, give any suggestions for any future talks. But other than that, I'd like to wish you all a very pleasant evening and see you again soon, hopefully. Good night.